Okay. And the top of the morning, here we are, picking up from where we left off with House of Leaves by Mark Delawinski. There's a ski at the end and it says Daniel in the middle. All right, so here we go, kicking off. And we have 8 pages left in this chapter. All right, so here we go now. In the film, we're 2 coffees deep. It is 8:30 in the morning. I've been up since 3:30 a.m. Here we go now. In the film, Tom and Davison's first encounter has almost nothing to do with each other. Instead of addressing any interpersonal issues, we find them both huddled over at Crowley level, mirror transit, alternately taking turns peering across the house, the line of light floating a few feet above the floor, occasionally interrupted by Hillary or Mallory in some keystone chase race around the children's beds. Tom believes they will account for the quarter-inch discrepancy with a perfectly level measurement. Later on, out in the backyard, Tom lights up a joint of marijuana. The drug clearly bothers Davison, and he says nothing. Tom knows his brother disapproves and refuses to alter his behavior. Based on their body language and the way both of them avoid looking directly at each other, not to speak of the space between their words, the last 8 years continue to haunt them. Hey, at least I'm an acquaintance of Bill's now, Tom finally says, exhaling a thin stream of smoke. Not a drop of booze in over 2 years. At first glance, it seems hard to believe these 2 men are even related, let alone brothers. Tom is content. If there happens to be a game on and the soft place from to which to watch it, the Davison works out every day, devours volumes of astrologic criticism, and constantly attaches the world around him to one thing: photography. Tom gets by, Davison succeeds. Tom just wants to be, Davison must become. And yet, despite such obvious differences, anyone who looks past Tom's wide grin and considers his eyes will find surprisingly deep pools of sorrow, which is how we know they are brothers, because like Tom, Davison's eyes share the same water. Either way, the moment and opportunity for some kind of fraternal healing disappears when Tom makes an important discovery. Davison was wrong. The interior of the house exceeds the exterior, not by a quarter inch, but by 5/16. Five, excuse me, 5/16 of an inch. No matter how many legal pads, napkins, and newspaper margins they fill with notes and quotations, they cannot account for that fraction. One incontrovertible fact stands in their way. The exterior measurement must equal the internal measurement. Physics depend on a universe indefiantly centered on equal sight. As science writer and sometimes theologian David Comte wrote, God, for all intents and purposes, is an equal sign, and at least up until now, something humanity has always been able to believe in is that the universe adds up. On this point, both brothers agree. The problem must lie with their measuring technique, or with some unseen migrating factor. Air temperature, miscalibrated instruments, warped floors, something, anything. But after a day and a half passes without a solution, they both decide to look for help. Tom calls Lowell and postpones his construction obligations. Davison calls an old friend who teaches engineering at UVA. Early the following morning, both brothers head off for Chariotsville. Now, Davison is not the only one who knows people in the vicinity. Karen's friend Audrey McCall, nice Irish name that, drives down from Washington, D.C. to catch up and help construct some bookshelves. Thus, as Will and Tom set out to find an answer, two old friends put an enigma on hold, stir up some vodka tonics, and enjoy the rhythm of working with brackets and pine. Edith Soljukachka, I'm not going to apologize for my pronunciation of that, has written an impressive 40-page essay entitled Riddles Without on this one episode. While most of it focuses on what Sojua refers to as the political posture of both women, Karen as ex-model, Audrey as travel agent, one particular message yields an elegant perspective into the whys and the ways people confront unanswered questions, riddles. They delight or torment. Their delight lies in solutions. Answers provide bright moments of comprehension, perfectly suited for children who still inhabit a world where solutions are readily available. Implicit in the riddles form is a promise that the rest of the world resolves just as easily. And so, riddles comfort the child's mind, which spins wildly before the onslaught of so much information and so many subsequent questions. The adult world, however, produces riddles of a different variety. They do not have answers and are often called enigmas or paradoxes. Still, the old hint of the riddles form corrupts. These questions, by recoiling the most fundamental lesson, there must be an answer. From there comes torment. It is not uncharacteristic to encounter adults who detest riddles. A variety of reasons may lie behind their reaction, but a significant one is the rejection of the adolescent belief in answers. These adults are often the same ones who grow up and face the facts. They are offended by the incongruities. Blast, gosh darn it. Incongruities, incongruities of yesterday's riddles with answers when compared to today's riddles without. It is beneficial to consider the origins of a riddle. The Old English redals means opinion, conjure, which is related to the Old English redon, to interpret, in turn belonging to the same etymological history of reading. Riddling is an offshoot of reading, calling to mind the oh, we're having fun. Parpictorary, P-A-R-T-I-C-I-P-A-T-O-R-Y, parpictorary nature of that fact to interpret, which is all the adult world has left when faced with the unsolved. To read actually comes from Latin re, to calculate, to think, which is not only the progenitor of read, but of reason as well, both of which hail from the Greek artisin, to fit. Aside from giving us reason, artisan arkensin also gives us an unlikely sibling, Latin arma, meaning weapons. It seems that to fit the world or to make sense of it requires either reason or arms. Charmingly enough, Karen Green and Audrey McCall, love the name, fit it with a bookshelf. Jesus Christ. As we all know, Both reason and weapons will eventually be resorted to. At least, though, for now, before the explorations, before the bloodshed, a drill, a hammer, and a Phillips screwdriver suffice. Karen refuses to her books as her Karen refers to her books as her newly found day-to-day comfort. By assembling a stronghold for them, she provides a pleasant balance between the known and the unknown. Here stands one warm, solid, colorful wall of volume after volume of history, poetry, photo albums, and pulp. And though ivory eventually subsides this moment, for now, at least, it remains uncommented upon, and thus wholly innocent. Karen simply removes a photo album, as anyone might do, and causes all the books to fail like dominoes along the length of the shelf. However, instead of tumbling on the floor, they are soundly stopped, eliciting a smile from both women and this profound remark by Karen. No better books ends than two walls. What the fuck? Excuse me, I apologize. Excuse me, I do sincerely apologize. However, instead of tumbling to the floor, they soundly stopped, eliciting a smile from both women and thus profound remarks by Karen. No better bookends than two walls. Lessons from a library. Okay, thank you. Sojourn's analysis, especially concerning the inherent innocence of Karen's project, sheds some light on the value of patience. Walter, Joseph, Adeline argue that Sojourn from the dishonest partnership with the shelf building segment, riddle me this, riddle me that, is all elegant crap. This is not a confrontation with the unknown, but a flat out case of denial. What Atlin himself denies is the need to face some problems with patience, to wait instead of humble, or to Tolstoy wrote, Dans délire mon cher absentes. Gibson's, when working on the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, would go on long walks before sitting down to write. Walking was a time to organize his thoughts, focus, and relax. Karen's shelf building discovers has everything to do with the acceptance of not knowing. Of course, not knowing hardly prevents the approaching chaos. Tu l'homme en mer mussi vesir considère en élément de l'an cathérico. 3 years. Okay, hang on a second. Now this picks up, it drops off and it picks up and it picks up and it drops off, and we're at the end. So we have a little interlude. Wait, no, is that an interlude? This is the interlude. Okay. Okay, so there's a little interlude thing. I think this might be a character piece. I'll try to keep my accents in order. I guess you might say, in a roundabout way, the old man introduced us. Anyway, since that episode in the tattoo shop, I haven't got out as much. Though, to tell you the truth, I'm no longer convinced anything happened. I keep cornering myself with questions. Did I really experience some sort of decapitating seizure? I mean, or did I invent it? Maybe I just got a little creative with the residual hangover or a stupid head rush. Whatever the truth. I've been spending more and more time riddling through Zambino's bits. Riddling also means sifting, as in passing corner, gravel, or cylinders through a coarse sleeve. A certain coded taught me that. A certain chode taught me that, excuse me. Not only have I found journals packed with bibliographies and snacking etymologies and strange little, I don't know what you'd call them, I also came across this notepad crammed with names and telephone numbers. Zamboni's readers, easily over 100 of them, though, as I quickly discovered, more than a few of the numbers were now defunct, and very few of the names have last names, and for whatever reason, those that are unlisted. I left a couple of messages on some machines, then somewhere on the page 3, Miss Rightcare picked up. I told her about my inheritance, and she immediately agreed to meet me for a drink. Amber, it turned out, was quite a number. A quarter French and beautiful a quarter French and a quarter Native American. Oh my lord. With naturally black hair, dark blue eyes, and a beautiful belly. Long and flat and thin, with a slender twine of silver piercing her navel. A barbed wire tattoo in blue and red encircled her ankle. Whether Zamboni knew it or not, she was a sight I'm sure he was sorry to miss. He loved to brag about how uneducated he was, Amber told me. I never even went to high school, he would say. Good, that makes me smarter than you. We talked like that a little, but most of the time I just read to him. He insisted on Tolstoy. Um, Said I read Tolstoy better than anyone else. I think that was mainly because I could manage the French passages okay, my Canadian background and all. After a few drinks, we ambled over to the Viper. Lude was hanging out at the door and walked us in. Much to my surprise, Amber grabbed my arm and we headed to the stairs. This thing we shared in common seemed to have created a surprisingly intense bond. Lude listened to us for a while, hastening to add at every pause that he was the one who'd found the damn thing. In fact, he was the one who'd called me. He'd even seen Amber around the building a few times, but because he hadn't taken the time to read any of the text, he could never address the particulars of our conversation. Amber and I were lost to a different world, a deeper history. Lude knew the play. He ordered a drink he ordered a drink on my tab and went in search of other entertainment. When I eventually got around to asking Amber to describe Zamboni, she just called him imperceivable and alone, though not I think so lonely. Then the first band came on and we stopped talking. Afterwards, Amber was the one who resumed the conversation, stepping a little closer, her elbow grazing mine. I never got the idea he had a family. He continued. I asked him once, and I remembered this very clearly. I asked him if he had any children. He said he didn't have any children anymore. Then he added, "Of course, you're all my children," which was strange since I was the only one there. But the way he looked at me with those blank eyes, she shuddered and quickly folded her arms as if she'd just gotten cold. It was like that tiny place of his was suddenly full of faces and he could see them all, even speak to them. It made me real uneasy, like I was surrounded by ghosts. Do you believe in ghosts? I told her I don't know. She smiled. I'm a Virgo. What about you? We ordered another round of drinks. The next band came on, and we didn't stay to hear them finish. As we walked to her place, it turned out she lived nearby, right above Sunset Plaza. In fact, she kept returning to the old man, a trace of her own obsession mingling with the dirt of her thoughts. I just want to say, I live in Sunset Plaza. This is where we are right now. And yeah, I used to be I started off as the front door guy, the venue that they're at, the Viper Room. Started out as the front door guy there, and then I became the production manager, and then I became the general manager. all within my first 2 years of arriving in Los Angeles. But that's a different story for a different day. This is entertaining for me. Thank you. So, not so lonely, she murmured. I mean, with all those ghosts, me and his other children, whoever they were, though, actually, I stopped and forgot about this. I don't know why. I mean, it was why I finally stopped going over there. When he blinked his eyelids, this is kind of weird, but they stayed closed a little bit longer than a blink, like he was consciously closing them or about to sleep. And I always wondered for a fraction of a second if they would ever open again. Maybe they wouldn't. Maybe he was going to go to sleep or maybe even die. And looking at his face then, so serene and peaceful, made me sad. And I guess I take back what I said before, because with his eyes closed, he didn't look alone. Then he looked lonely, terribly lonely. And that made me feel real sad. And it made me feel real lonely. I stopped going there after a while. But you know what? Not visiting him made me feel guilty. I think I still feel guilty about just dropping out on him like that. We stopped talking about Zamboni then. She paged her friend, Christina, who took less than 20 minutes to come over. There were no introductions. We just sat down on the floor and snorted lots of coke off a CD case, gulped down a bottle of wine, and then used it to play Spin the Bottle. They kissed each other first, then they kissed me, and then we forgot about the bottle. And I even managed to forget about Zamboni, about this, and about how much that attack in the tattoo shop had put me on edge. 2 kisses was all it took. A comfort, a warmth, perhaps temporary, perhaps false, but reassuring nonetheless, and mine and theirs, ours. All three of us giggling. Insane giggles and laughter, with still more kisses on the way. And I remember a brief instant then, out of the blue, when I suddenly glimpsed my own father, a rare but oddly peaceful recollection, as if he actually approved of my play in the way he himself had always laughed and played, always giggling, serenading to its ease, always playing, surrendering to its ease. Oh, blast, I lost my place. Surrendering to its ease, especially when he soared in great updrafts of light, burning off distant plateaus of Bistur and stage, sparkling blank the tender sky that never once let him down, preserving, turn to the wind, preserving, never quite, outtracing his hoops of joy, trailing him in his sudden turn to the wind, followed then by a near vertical climb up to the angels of the sun, and I was barely 8 and still with him. And yes, that was the thought that flickered madly through me. A brief instant of communion possessing me with the warmth and ageless ease, causing me to smile again and relax as if memory alone could lift the heart like the like the enthusiasm and caressing, and in turn devouring their dark lips, dark with wine and fleeting love, and ancient memory love, and promised by finally never grave, until there were too many kisses to count or remember, and the memory of love proved not love at all, and needed a replacement, which our bodies found. And then the giggles subsided and the laughter dimmed. The darkness enfolded all of us, and we gave away our childhood. For nothing we died, and condoms littering the floor, and Christina, what the fuck? All of us, And we gave away our childhood for nothing, and we died, and condoms littered the floor, and Christina threw up in the sink, and Amber chuckled a little and kissed me a little more, but in a way that told me it was time to leave. And so, only now, days later, as I gave these moments shape here, do I re encounter what my high briefly withheld. The covering memory permanently hitched to everything preceded it, and so prohibited all of it. Those memories, the good ones, no matter how different, how blissful, eclipsed by the jackknife trailer across the highway, the tractor truck lodged in a stony ditch off the shoulder, oily smoke billowing up into the night, and hardly deterred by the pinprick drizzle, the fire itself crawling up from the punctured fuel tanks, stripping the paint, melting the tires, and blackening the shattered glass. The windshield struck from within, each jagged line traveling to the story of the broken heart which no 10-year-old boy should ever have to recollect, let alone see. Even if it was only in half tone, the ink, all of it, over and over again, finally gathered on his delicate finger tips. As if by tracing the pictures printed on the newspapers, he could, in some way, retract the details of death, smooth away the cab where the man he saw and loved like a god agonized and died with no words of his own, illegible or otherwise, no God at all. And so, by dissolving the black newspaper after another, which was when the officials responsible for the custody of parentless children decided something was gravely wrong with him and sent him away, making sure he had no clippings, and all the ink, all that remained of his father, was washed from my hands. Right, that's that interlude part over. That was heavy, So it was very funny as well, though. The whole the three-way was triggering these other memories of glory and then trauma. Anyway, here we are back to the main thing. Karen's project is one mechanism against an uncanny or that which is unhomelike. She remains watchful and willing to let the bizarre dimensions of her house gestate within her. She challenges the irregularity by introducing normalcy, her friends' presence, bookshelves, peaceful conversations. In this respect, Karen acts as the quintessential gatherer. She keeps close to the homestead, and while she may not forage for berries and mushrooms, she does accumulate tiny bits of sense. Now, Davison and Tom, on the other hand, are classic hunters. They select weapons, tools, reason, and they track their prey, a solution. Billy Reston is the one they hope will help them achieve their goal. He is a gruff man, frequently caustic and more like a drill sergeant than a tenured professor. He is also a pragmatic who has spent almost half his life in a aluminium wheelchair. Davison, barely 27 when he first met Reston, actually it was a photograph that brought them together. Davison had been on assignment in India, taking pictures of trains, rail workers, engineers, whatever caught his attention. The piece was supposed to capture the clamor of industry outside the Hyderabad. What ended up plastered on the pages of more than a few newspapers, however, was a photograph of a black American engineer desperately trying to outrun a falling high voltage wire. The cable had been cut when an inexperienced crane operator had swung wide of a freight car and accidentally collided with the electrical pole. The wood and instant splintering, tearing it in half. One tower of the power cables, which descended, love that word, descended, toward the helpless Billy Roston, spitting sparks and lashing the air like a nag or a Niagara. That very photograph hangs on Reston's office wall. It captures the mixture of fear and disbelief on Reston's face as he suddenly finds himself running for his life. One moment he was casually scanning the yard, thinking about lunch, and in the next he was about to die. His stride is stretched, back toes trying to push him out of the way, hands reaching for something, anything, to pull him out of the way, but he is too late. That serpentine shape surrounds him, moving much too fast for any last-ditch effort to escape. As Fred de Sebendebeth remarked in April 1954, les juges sont faits, nous sommes faits. Tom takes a hard look at his remarkable 11 by 14 black and white print. That was the last time I had legs, Reston tells him, right before that ugly snake bit them off. I used to hate the picture, and then I sort of became grateful for it. Now, when anyone walks into my office, they don't have to think about asking how I ended up in this chariot. They can see for themselves. Thank you, Navy, you bastard. Ricky Ticky Davy with a Nikon. Eventually, the chat subsides and the three men get down to business. Reston's response is simple, rational, and exactly what both brothers came to hear. There's no question the problem with your equipment. I'd have to check out Tom's stuff myself, but I'm willing to bet university money there's something a little out of whack with it. I've got a few things you can borrow, a Stanley beacon leveler and a laser distance meter. He grins at Davison. The meter's even Lucia. That should put this ghost in the grave fast. But if it doesn't, I'll come out and measure your place myself, and I'll change you, and I'll charge you for my time. If it is, and I love it, I'll come out to my place yourself, and I'll charge you for my time. Both Will and Tom chuckled, perhaps feeling a little foolish. Ha ha ha. Reston shakes his head. If you ask me, Navy, you've got a little too much time on your hands. You'd probably be better off if you just took your family for a nice long drive. I love that. Exactly. Like when fathers do lose the plot, as they inevitably do, and same with mothers, it's always like, hey, instead of this, why don't you like enjoy your life with your kids? Oh, I once worked for a record producer, and on our one day off on a Sunday, he'd take his daughter to rallies, and like where they were like, anyway, this is like in 2016, so they're like not a good hang, and then they come into work giving out about it every month. Like Jesus, so yeah, why don't you take her to the park, take her to Disneyland instead of taking her to a riot? You know. Anyway, boo, 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 boo. I apologize for the interlude. Let us get back here. On their way back, Davison points the high 8 toward the darkening horizon. For a while, neither brother says a word. Will breaks the silence first. Funny how all it took was a fraction of an inch to get us in a car together. Pretty strange. Thanks for coming, Tom. Like there was really a chance I'd say no. A pause. Again, Davison speaks up. I almost wonder if I got tangled up in all this measuring stuff. I almost wonder if I got tangled up in all this measuring stuff just so I had some pretext to call you. um, Oh no, I just found. No, that's okay. Is that part of the last bit? Zamboni left the rest of his footnote buried beneath a particularly dark spill of ink. At least I'm assuming it's ink. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's something else. But then that's not really important. In some case, I've managed to recover the lost text. See chapter 9. Here, however, I failed. 5 lines gone along with the rest of Mr. Zebarath. Despite the best efforts, Tom cannot hold back a laugh. You know, I hate to tell you this, but there are simpler reasons you could have come with. You're telling me, Davison says, shaking his head. Rain starts splashing down on the windshed, and lightning cracks across the sky. Another pause follows. This time, Tom breaks the silence. Did you hear the one about the guy on the tightrope? Davison grins. I'm glad to see some things never change. Hey, this one's true. There was this 25-year-old guy walking on a tightrope across a deep river gorge, while halfway around the world, another 25-year-old guy was getting a blowjob from a 70-year-old woman. But get this, at the exact same moment, both men were thinking the exact same thought. You know what that is? No clue. Tom gives his brother a wink. Don't look down. and thus, and thus the storm begins to ravage the Virginians. Another one just as easily dissipates and vanishes in the flood and bad jokes and old stories. When confronting this spattle disparity in the house, Karen set her mind on familiar things while Davison went in search of a solution. The children, however, just accepted it. They raced through the closet. They played in it. They inhabited it. They denied the paradox by swallowing it whole. Paradox, after all, is two reconcilable truths, but children do not know the laws of the world well enough yet to fear ramifications of the irreconcilable. There are certainly no there are certainly no primal primal, excuse me. There are certainly no primal associations with spatial anomalies. Similar to the ingenuous opening sequence of the Davison record, seeing these two giddy children romp around is an equally unsettling experience, perhaps because their state of naivety is so appealing to us, even seductive, offering such a simple resolution to an enigma. Unfortunately, denial also means ignoring the possibility of peril. The possibility, however, seems at least momentarily irrelevant when we cut to Will and Tom hauling Billy Reston's equipment upstairs, the authority of the tools quickly subduing any sense of threat. Just watching the two brothers use the Stanley beacon level to establish the distance between the distance they will need to measure communicates comfort. When they turn their attention to the Lycia meter, it is nearly impossible not to at last expect some kind of resolution to this confounding problem. In fact, Tom's closing in fact, Tom's crossing crossed excuse me. In closing, Tom's crossed fingers as the Class 2 laser finally fires a tiny red dot across the width of the house, managed to succinctly represent our own sympathies. As the results are not immediate, we wait along with the whole family as the internal computer calibrates the dimensions. The Davison captures these seconds in 16 millimeter. His ARFX already pre-focused and left running. Spools in 24 frames per second As Daisy and Chad sit on their beds in the background, Hillary and Montgomery linger in the foreground near Tom, while Karen and Audrey stand off to the right near the newly created bookshelves. Suddenly, Davison lets out a hoot. It appears the discrepancy has finally been eliminated. Tom peers over his shoulder. Goodbye, Mr. Falcone. One more time, Davison says. One more time, just make sure. Oddly enough, a sight, a, s- excuse me, oddly enough, a slight draft keeps easing one of the closet doors shut. It has an eerie effect because each time the door closes, we lose sight of the children. Hey, would you mind propping that open with something? Davison asks his brother. Tom turns to Karen's shelves and reaches for the largest volume he can find. A novel, just as with Karen, its removal causes an immediate domino effect. Only this time, as the books topple onto each other, the last few do not stop at the wall as they had previously done, but fall instead to the floor, revealing at least a foot between the end of the shelf and the plaster. Tom, Tom thinks nothing of it. Sorry, he mumbles and leans over to pick up the scattered books, which is exactly when Karen screams. I like this book. This is good stuff. Okay, we're on to chapter 5. Or is that chapter 9? Oh, who cares? V, we're on to V. V is 5, I believe. Okay, thank you. To be continued. Happy Sunday. Happy Sunday. The Oscars today. Everybody on the red carpet. Yeah.